Welcome, welcome, welcome. 6 years ago, 6 years ago today, women in Cary, North Carolina, women who are enthusiastic about data, met to create a group so they could support one another. There was no instruction manual. But 6 years later, by now, jobs have been found, presentations have been made, books have been read, online courses taken, degrees earned, leaders are yet in the making, meals have been shared, drinks shared, and of course, connections made. But most importantly, friendships have been made. The kind of friendships with hugs and uh, and parties and those very dear words, I know what you mean. I am so excited today for our 6-year anniversary. We have Anna Nyulund to speak about the coding interviews because supporting women pursuing careers in data science is in our mission. I'm so glad all of you are here, and I mean all of you, and because I know all of you support women in data science, and I thank you so much for your attendance today. So she's going to talk in a few minutes. We are being recorded right now, and she's going to give her talk. We're going to do some discussion, and I'll stop recording. And then after all that, I invite all of you who would like to participate in our breakout rooms where we do our customary update exercise. And this update exercise is how we get to know one another. So I hope you'll stick around for that. But for now, I'll hand it over to our speaker program manager, Gordana.
Hello, my name is Gordana. I was on that first meeting when the organization was founded. And today I have pleasure to announce Anna Nyulund that I met on LinkedIn. And I like her posts and her talks, and I like her honesty and also a human touch that she puts in all of her posts. And she talks very honest about jobs and about data science and about coding interviews. She's an aerospace engineer. She's a software engineer. She's data scientist. Interesting about her that she's from Russia and she came into US when she was only 21, and she didn't have any college degree, and she enrolled in college, started with a basic classes. It took her time to go through math and physics and algebra and English, but once she passed those basics, she just thrived. And also she has a daughter. And Anna, is there something else that you would like that I tell about you that I didn't mention?
No, I think this is a very good introduction. Thank you so much, Gordana. That describes me very well.
I give the floor to you.
Okay, sounds good. So hi, everyone. We already went through my introduction, so I will start about crushing technical interviews. Gordana found me on LinkedIn, and so I decided to make a presentation because for me personally, going through technical interviews was absolutely painful experience, especially at the beginning. And it was sometimes depressing. Sometimes I wanted to drop out of the industry. And so I just want to share a few insights that I wish somebody else would tell me when I started this data journey. So hopefully you will learn from my mistakes and insights. So let's start. So the first one is background, how usually interviews are viewed in the industry. So common belief is that those coding interviews, they test for basic coding skills, and they test for computer science algorithms and data structures, problem solving smarts, and software engineering.
Excuse me, Anna.
Yeah.
Would you reshare your presentation?
You can't see it? Okay. Just a second. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Perfect. Okay, so when I, started, since I came from traditional engineering background and I didn't take any computer science, for me it was very intimidating at first. And I always felt like I'm not a real computer scientist or data scientist. So how could I pass those interviews? And I kept failing them, even though I studied and studied and studied, I kept failing those interviews. And so as I did more research, then I realized that those interviews, first of all, they actually check if you have performance and anxiety or not first. So if you have strong performance and anxiety, there is a higher chance for you to fail. Also, the results are non-deterministic and often arbitrary. So it's and I'll show you another plot. So it's very hard to achieve consistent results. So even as a senior software engineer, senior data scientist, you will still sometimes fail those interviews. So as you progress in your career, doesn't mean you will progress with the coding interviews. And finally, the results are not repeatable, and they are definitely not indication of the future performance. So you can hire someone who did very well during the coding interviews, and they will not do well on the job, and vice versa when you hire someone who failed the interview, but they are very good with data, they're excellent data scientists, and they can solve software engineering problems. So, but this is where we are, and a lot of people started rebelling against coding interviews. A lot of them don't like it, they refuse it, and I'll cover it later. However, here we are, and even though everyone in the industry kind of knows about it, we still have to take them, we still have to pass them. So I'll just give you a few insights to see what you can do personally to pass those interviews. So here's the data that I wanted to show you, the measure of performance. So I have the research paper at the end of this presentation, and it shows that, as you can see, the results are varied. And so only 25% of people are consistent with the passing coding interviews. And so the companies are looking for those 25%. And to get yourself to be in that consistent 25%, consistent high performance in coding interviews takes time and effort. The other problem with interviews is some of us have imposter syndrome and some of us have Dunning-Kruger effect. I have both, so depending on the topic. So sometimes, you don't know the topic in depth and you think, well, how hard could it be? And you code something up and the code is compiling, and then you still get rejection in the interview and you think, well, why? I did everything right. And they don't really give you feedback, but it's maybe because you didn't do object-oriented programming or didn't go more in depth into topic. So I'll show you a few slides in that. So you really don't know. So I always go to those interviews and they say, well, how did you do? It's impossible to tell. You think you did well and then you flunk it, or you think you did horrible and you pass it. This is a very important slide I wanted to show you. It's also the issue of diversity, right? So women, it's been shown that women drop out of those coding interviews a lot faster due to attrition rates. So I don't know why, and the paper didn't cover it, but it seems like after many failures, women finally say, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. This is obviously not working, so I'm going to try something different and either not do coding interviews or try some other routes. And so my advice here would be just remember this plot, and every time you feel like dropping out, because there will be times that you really want to drop out, just keep going, and eventually it's a numbers game, and as you get better, you will pass those interviews. So the main problem is overcoming stress and anxiety. So this research paper that I quoted showed interesting phenomenon that when women were watched by the interviewer, they did not do very well on the coding test. However, when all observers were removed and they were by themselves, either doing it in HackerRank or just writing the code by themselves, they passed all of the interviews. So the main goal is not only to get technical knowledge to pass those interviews, but you also have to work on overcoming stress and anxiety. So when you experience an anxiety, performance anxiety, it causes stress. Once you start experiencing stress and the cortisol starts kicking in into your brain, your performance will drop by approximately 50%. It might drop more. And so what happens is you start having a tunnel vision. So you look at the problem and it looks insane, even though when you look at it by yourself at home, when there's no time pressure, you probably can easily solve it. And your mind shuts down. You just freeze and you start rambling and you just don't know what to do. So the main point when you study is you have to focus on overcoming that, and I'll show you how. So the main goal is to train hippocampus special memory that you can easily access during the interview for lost things. So just like you lose keys in the house when you mindlessly drop them somewhere or put the phone somewhere when you cannot find it unless you have designated area, you have to create a mental map with certain topics that you can easily access during the interview. So you have to train your brain to recognize those problems and what kind of solution to apply to it. Because if you try to apply something from scratch, there's probably going to be a failure. The other problem that I did not know, because I was not a data scientist and I was a little bit naive and people were not really helping me, they told me if you go to lead code and solve multiple problems in lead code, you will be able to pass those interviews. And so then I would sit there and sometimes think about difficult problem for 6 hours in a row. And I would think, how do people solve those problems in 15 minutes if it takes me 6 hours to solve it? Well, the problem is because you're reinventing the wheel, because a lot of those algorithms, they already have been invented by brilliant computer scientists, usually graduate students, and they took the whole summer to modify and create this efficient algorithm. And all you have to do is memorize it and remember how to write it down to solve a problem instead of reinventing the solution from scratch. So if you try to remember those algorithms and have a mental map, then it will be more of a prospective premortem insight to minimize the disaster. So you're not thinking, oh my gosh, I should have remembered and tell them that. Oh my gosh, I should have remembered and tell them that. You will already have it solid base in your head that you will be able to recall during the interview. So here's like, I guess, few advice on strategy how to do pre-mortem instead of post-mortem. So first of all, postpone the coding interview until you're ready, especially if it's with a large company like Facebook, Google, Amazon. They are well aware that their interview process is very difficult. And you can push those interviews until you're ready and they will work with you. For example, Facebook recruiter that I've been talking to, I probably have talked to her for a year and a half already. And still every 3 months she checks on me if I'm ready. And I keep telling her that I'm not ready because I'm not studying, because, you know, I have other things in life. So you, first of all, you can postpone it. So work with the recruiter and don't jump on the interview and think that, you know, you'll spend 2 weeks studying and then you will pass. If you code every day in your life and you have a degree in computer science and you're a really good student and you remembered all those algorithms, probably 2 weeks for you is good enough and you'll be able to pass it. If you don't have computer science background, then you'll probably need few months and maybe even 6 months to study, which is fine. And you'll need practice lead code. So work with the recruiter to postpone it. And the second part of it, since there are multiple stages in there, you can stretch them as far as 3 months. So you can literally stretch those first stage, second stage, and third stage as far as 3 months. And the reason why it's important, because when you start going to senior data science positions, they're asking you for system design interview, and it takes a while to prepare as well. During system design, you don't have to do coding in many cases, but you really have to know microservices and how the different patterns are arranged in object-oriented programming. So you can take your time and study, because the main point for recruiter is for you to pass all those interviews, take your time, and then they get the bonus. But if you're rushing in, try it and failing, then you'll probably be six months on a waiting period, and the recruiter will not get anything from it. So it's better to prepare and push it than going for it and failing. So coding frequency is more of a muscle memory. So try to code every day, because since we work with data, sometimes we maybe working with Tableau or SQL. So we're not working with like Python or C++. So make sure that you code something up every single day. So you can go to Lead Code, and there is an app for that. It's called Lead Hub, and just try to do at least one puzzle a day in the morning. And so this way you constantly have your muscle memory up. When you look at the problem, break it down. If it looks crazy, those of you who have STEM degrees, I have engineering degrees. So back in engineering, they always told us, never start solving the problem until you do free body diagram. And we always thought it was stupid. And we had to draw, an object or a car and put all the forces on it, and then we would start solving the equation. But it would always help, because this way we would not miss something elementary because we were rushing. So you do the same thing with the problem here. You make sure you write all the assumptions, you ask for edge cases, and keep asking questions. Do they want to minimize time complexity or space complexity? And before you even start solving, just break it down as much as you can. Then create, like I said earlier, create mental map of problem solving strategies. And I'll give you a little bit more hints on it later. So this way, if you kind of can remember, like, okay, I have an array, is it sorted or not sorted? If you sort it, you use one algorithm. If it's not sorted, you use another one. But you kind of already start trying to focus on what to apply instead of trying to solve the problem from scratch. Focus on main goal, show your flow. So compiling brilliant code that works is not what they're looking for. Maybe at Google, but at least when I talk to Facebook recruiters, that's not what they wanted to see. They basically looking for someone who can code the problem up, so they can write code, so they can carry their own load. And finally, someone that is pleasant to work with. So if for example, they're reading your code, and sometime later after you wrote it, they can pin you on a messenger and say, hey, I don't understand what you wrote here. Can you explain it to me real quick? And you'll be able to explain what you did. So that's why they're looking for this communication. So when you do an interview, it's okay when you just talk to the engineer and trying to have back and forth process and communicate and ask them questions. And sometimes it goes a long way. And I'll give you an example. I passed one interview for a senior machine learning engineer, and over there I didn't write a lot of code. I was just guiding an engineer and telling him, asking him questions. Why is this? Why is that? This doesn't look right. And he is the one who wrote the code, and I passed the interview. So you don't have to constantly write your own code. It's good that you can, but just, I think it's more important to have this good energy back and forth with the interviewer. And finally, that trick of 80-20, that's Pareto principle. Since there is so much anxiety and stress that you can freeze and forget something, it's very good if you can try to commit this mental map into 80% of your muscle memory. So you can try to code and remember how to code automatically with your hands. And then if you can do that, and if it's all committed to memory, then you'll only have 20% on modification, which means you have to debug your own code and make sure that what you wrote actually makes sense and being able to explain it to the interviewer. But if you see, it's not 80% problem solving, because it's very hard to solve problems when you're stressed out. 80% is recalling what you learned, and only 20% is used to solve the problem. Finally, always ask for accommodations. You don't have to have doctor's note for that. So if you have any kind of an anxiety problem, ADHD, PTSD, ask for accommodations. And so you can ask for double time. So this way you're not rushing. You can, it depends on the company. They all are different, but I've tried different companies, and the smaller companies work with you better. And they ask to take home test, for example, instead of doing coding interview, if it helps you better, or to use your own IDE, or try to do hacker rank instead of coding interview with the person if that helps you. There are different ways, but a lot of companies accommodate. And usually when you ask for accommodations, they okay with you to take the test home and to have open book. So you're not trying to recall everything from memory. Larger companies, especially Google, they're a little bit more strict, so it wouldn't work, but you can still try to see, what you can pull off when you ask for accommodations. And finally, if you can, don't rush. It's very hard when you're stressed out, and so the first thing you want to do is start jump into the problem and start solving it. And that's when you get stuck. So first, just write down, really spend at least 5 minutes trying to understand the problem. Write down all the edge cases. Make sure that you clear out all ambiguities with the interviewer about the edge cases. And only then try to write some pseudocode, step 1, step 2, what would you like to do, and then try to solve it. It's okay if you run out of time and your code will not compile. As long as your logic is good, you should be good. So what not to do? This is my personal painful experiences. So maybe you will never go through this, and maybe it will never be the same for you. But I am a very neurotic person. I have a lot of anxiety. I didn't come from a background of computer science. So I literally hit every of those steps. And honestly, it didn't help me. I didn't change anything. It just wasted my time and ruined my mood. And I almost quit the industry because I was thinking those thoughts. So let's cover them one by one. Not accepting the situation. I think this is probably the most difficult one because you think that those interviews are not fair, they shouldn't be there should be different way, and you just don't want to do them. And the thing is, they're not going anywhere. And so some senior engineers, they do negotiate the waivers, and people try different things. Everyone is trying to fight the system differently. But the fact is, the interview, like from what I've seen, they're not going away. So sooner or later, you're going to have to pass them. So it's better start studying for them earlier than later. Arguing with recruiters and interviewers. You definitely can do it if you want to. I've done my share of sending emails to recruiters and interviewers, explaining myself, explaining why this is not fair, why maybe this is not good for diversity, because it's definitely more punishing towards minorities and especially women, and activates imposter syndrome. It gives you mental difficulties. It doesn't matter. They all know it. It's just a company policy. They can't change it. Managers themselves don't like it because they see it as an obstacle as well. It's just someone on executive level that would have to make different decision. And as long as they're not losing people and they have talent, they get those top 25%, they will keep doing those interviews. So you will just waste your time sending emails or arguing with recruiters and interviewers because it's not going to change. Wasting time and self-pity, that also just brings you down, thinking, poor me, and I have to go through this, and it's not fair, and I'm a good engineer. We all go through this, so all I can tell you is like, you're not alone. It's just the way it is. And I really don't like saying that because I really focus on self-improvement, and I like changing things and making them more efficient. But in this case, it's just the way it is. Thinking, this is probably, I see the most common one on Reddit, especially on Quora, and especially with new grads, and they say, well, I'm just not good, or I'm not a real data scientist, a real software engineer, because I can't do those things, and I don't know merge sort or binary search, and a lot of us, data scientists, we don't even use those algorithms on a day-to-day basis. So I wouldn't say that you're not good or not real just because you don't know something. We all have partial knowledge of something, and some of us know some things and the other ones know the other things. For example, I don't know A/B testing very well. It's just not my thing. I really don't like it, but I am good with natural language processing. And I don't memorize merge sort, and I have no idea how to do binary search tree. I've studied it probably 3 or 4 or 5 times, but because I don't use it every day, I forget the minute I cover it. So Just because you don't know certain algorithm or forgot something during the interview, or you failed the interview, doesn't reflect on your performance at all. It doesn't define you at all. It's just simply shows that you did not pass the interview. That's all it is. Thinking that you don't know anything. This is really hard because when you start preparing for those technical interviews, there's so much stuff to cover. There is just machine learning alone. You have to know classic machine learning algos. Then if you have specification, computer vision or natural language processing or information retrieval, and on top of it, there's all these different data structures. There's a lot. So I wouldn't, it can be very overwhelming and you start feeling like, oh, I just don't know all those things. Just break it down into basic things. And as long as you know a few basic things, is better than nothing. So I wouldn't say that. Thinking that you cannot code. If you can write a for loop by yourself, you're good to go. That's my very simple base, because I've seen people, I couldn't write for loops before. For the love of God, it took me a very long time, probably 3 months, to learn different types of for loops. And it's been so difficult that there is even a bullying thread online somewhere where they say like, wow, this person is really hard-headed because she doesn't know how to write for loops. So now, of course, I know how to write for loops, but I'm saying if you can write a for loop, you can master anything, you can definitely code. Everything else you can learn. Thinking that you're a bad problem solver. This one ticked me off a lot because there's a lot of people who say, you have to show us that you can solve problems. You have to show ability that you solve problems. But you solve problems every day. Maybe you're a chemist who know how to solve chemical problems. Maybe you're engineer, so you can solve technical engineering, physics-based problems. You solve problems. So here you just have to transfer your skill and find your own intrinsic way how you're going to solve computer puzzle problems. That's all it is. So you're definitely you're definitely a good problem solver. Otherwise, you would not be selected for the interview. Becoming hopeless. For that, I would just like to remind you that there always will be interviews and people will always hire. So right now, if you go on the news, you can see that the companies are going through freezing. Meta is doing freeze out. They're not hiring anymore. They all contacting me every day. So like, I don't know where those news are coming from. If you know machine learning, if you're data scientist, if you work with data, there will always someone who wants to hire you, and there's a lot of positions open. So don't become hopeless if you fail 1 or 2 or 3 interviews. I took 200 interviews. I only passed about 20. So I failed 180. So at this point, because I didn't study. So at this point, there's always going to be an interview and eventually you will pass. And definitely don't give up. I would like to say it especially to women, because given that plot, it shows that, after 2 interviews, many drop out. Well, I took 200 of them. So, just keep going and remind yourself that you don't have to be that statistic. And you keep going and you keep trying, and eventually you will win. So next one, I guess, just main facts that are kind of put there so you can remember that more than 50 senior software engineers nowadays refuse those interviews or they negotiate a waiver. So once you go higher in a career, you can try to negotiate. So you can try to talk to recruiters and see if you can skip the interview. Many job candidates cheat if they can find a way. So I've seen, for example, few websites that data scientists from China, like they work at Facebook and they're trying to help their own, and everything was in Chinese, but there were like this problem of the week. This is what we're asking at Facebook this week. So make sure you memorize this problem or that problem. I've seen some people who already know the managers that they would give them folders with information and they would try to study those folders. It's up to you. There's not a lot of those candidates, only 1 or 2. And most people who go through those interviews, they definitely pass them. They study hard. They study 2, 3, 6 months, almost every day, and eventually they pass those interviews. Many engineering managers don't like those interviews themselves. You can go to Reddit and Blind, and you will see that they will say, I'm tired of putting my candidates through this. I don't like this system. Because when, like, I worked as a manager before, so you really need someone brilliant. You know, you meet this right person who really know how to work with data and how to do the certain thing that you need the person to do. And so you're super excited, and then there's always this interview that you have to put your job candidate through, and then they drop out. And so you know there's a very good job candidate, they will do very well at work, but then they drop out or they don't pass the coding interview, and you're stuck searching for someone else. It's a very frustrating experience for managers as well. So just because everyone is doing it doesn't mean they like it. And like I said earlier, you will always have more interviews, no matter what. And some of them you will fail, even when you become super senior and you prepare for 2-3 months, because it's very hard to get in that 25% consistency. And it becomes a game of Russian roulette. So as long as you keep applying and studying, you will start passing them eventually. So problem solving mindset. So to me, it's, I guess, very important because I was in engineering school. So everyone was always telling me, you have to learn how to solve problems, even the ones that you have never seen before. And the whole point of us teaching you in college is for you to develop engineering intuition. But for me, that was not software engineering. That was physics-based engineering. So here's a few things, I guess, a few pointers you can take and use them or not use them. It's just something that works for me. It might not work for you, and you'll find your own way and find the ways that work for you. So I look at it as mental discipline. So it's ability to go for long, wild goose chases and have open-minded experimentation. So this is more of a persistent curiosity. You always want to learn what's in there. Is there something there or not? For interview, though, the time scale of concentration required needs to increase. So and the way you do it is do muscle memory. If you have ADHD, I would definitely advise to take medication, because you have to really focus on the problem and try to go through it. And you don't want to have distractions. Dealing with failure. So the way I guess I would look at it is, it's okay to investigate, and it's always worthwhile, even if it leads to a dead end, because you learn something in the process anyways. So it's not always about the result. It's a journey that you enjoy, not necessarily the end. Emotional attitude, I would say, is more closer to mountaineer than a gym rat. So when you're a gym rat, you're repetitively doing the same exercise in the gym. So that's how lead code would be. While mountaineer, you have to be a little bit different because the terrain is always different. So you're not on the same machine. So you're more getting your muscles ready to grab the wall and go through different unknown terrain. You don't repeat the same thing, but you're getting your body stronger. That's the same thing you would do with your mental map in your brain when you're preparing for the interviews. And finally, problem solving is a craft, just like any other craft, that can be learned and transferred. So if you already have some kind of education, whether it's STEM or non-STEM, when you were methodically applying yourself and sorting through the problem, you already can do it. So all you have to do is build background knowledge, learn how other people solved certain problems, and keep having active engagement with it, which means not to do those things that I told you earlier. Finally, okay, so where am I? So this is kind of a mental map that you can start with. It's definitely not complete, and I would take it with a grain of salt. But first, when if you kind of know those things, you'll be okay during the interview. You should be fine. This is not complete, but you kind of will be comfortable, and then you'll see your consistency increase. So first I would learn big O, and I wouldn't just learn, what big O means, but I would just write it down by hand, or the equation, and I would derive it a few times. This way, during the interview, you can derive those equations for big O. It makes it easier to talk about it. Sorting fundamentals would be good to cover. Hash tables in Python, you usually use dictionaries. Then I would cover trees, then graphs, and famous Dijkstra that I cannot, for the love of God, to right from my memory. So that's another one that I would personally have to memorize. And finally, NP complete. So NP complete, I would not focus on too much. That came from a Google recruiter, and N stands for non-deterministic, P stands for polynomial. Basically, from what I understood, because I'm not a computer scientist, that some problems just do not have efficient solution. So if you maybe know top 10 problems from this list, so you would be able to recognize them. So if someone decides to trick you, apparently some Google recruiter or Google interviewer, you'll be able to recognize it and say, hey, this problem is non-complete. You can go through Geeks for Geeks, and there's different textbooks, and you can, if you Google this term, you will research, you'll see more on it. And so going through this mental map, you can click here, and so I'll share this presentation later. So this is a link to data structures, annotated references that Google recruiters gave me. And so you can go over basic data structures and cover it there. So that's when we come to memorizing. As an engineer, traditional physics-based engineer, I don't like memorizing. And I remember we, and back in college, always worked on, you have to understand what you're doing. And so we would always start with, F equals ma, that's basic physics equation. And then based on the conditions, whether it's rotation or something else, we would derive and derive and derive. So this is how we would solve problems. So if you're a computer scientist who has a degree, who really studied very hard, you're probably in the same level as me in physics-based engineering. You understand and you can expand everything. But those people are rare. And a lot of us do not have computer science background. And as long as we can code in a daily job and we can pass the interview, we are good to go. So the way you can memorize this code, and this code is a merge sort. So you just kind of memorize it in blocks. So kind of remember. So remember that you can, write a leaf here, and then there is recursive call, and there is a merge algorithm. So as long as you kind of remember which block goes after which block, the rest you kind of can derive. So if you start breaking all of your code this way, then it'll be easier for you to memorize or to get it into muscle memory, whatever it is. So general advice, as I said earlier, don't at least spend 5 minutes on understanding the problem. Don't rush into it right away, because if you rush into it, then you're going to get stuck on edge cases. Offer a brute force solution as quickly as possible. Don't worry about syntax errors, incorrect library usage, unless interviewer prompts, and they usually don't. So if there's some cool package that you usually use from Python, like Python is my language, just mention it. You don't have to remember exactly how to spell it and compile it. And think about time and space complexities from onset, not as an afterthought. So already kind of start thinking ahead of time, like, oh, okay, I have to solve this problem. So how would I solve it, in terms of efficiency? So this way you don't have to analyze it post-mortem again, you do it pro-mortem. So frame conversations in trade-offs, that's space and time complexity. Do light pseudocode before coding. Over-communicate, and ask if they want compilable code versus logic. And a lot of times they don't. And here, if you study resources that I have for you, so I would like to mention Interview Kickstart Bootcamp. So I think I participated in a program. So I think it's one of the best boot camps in there. It can be pricey though. So from what I heard last time, they modified it. So I think the lowest course is like $1,200 and the highest complete course is $10,000, which is a lot of money. And a lot of us can't afford it. If you can, it's good. The reason why it's good, because they already have Googlers, Dropbox, Facebook engineers, and senior managers who volunteer to teach those classes every weekend. And they have a lot of material that you can cover in 3 to 6 months. and they really over prepare you. So if you stick to this boot camp and you actually do study, you will pass it. And they so confident that you will pass it that they will, once you complete the program, they will do referrals to all of the FANG. And so the reason the way they justify this program is because average senior engineer senior machine learning engineer probably starts making from at least 300,000 a year, goes to 500,000 a year. Senior managers make even more money. And so they say you can pay $10,000 because you will increase your salary by $100,000 to $200,000. But you know, it all depends. I was not able to stick, to be honest, to this boot camp. So I've been in it for a year because I don't have time and there's a lot of material. So this is something that would require a lot of commitment, not just money-wise, but time-wise as well. So I would think about it wisely. And if you don't want to spend that much money and you just want to study online and do something, so here are a few resources that you can get started with. There's so many resources that you can absolutely drown in them right now. So my advice is stick to one. Just pick one and just do a little bit of it every day or every few days. Because if you start going there and there and there, it becomes going to become very fast overwhelming. And then you're going to think, I don't know anything, how to memorize all of those things. So LeetCode and LeetHub, and I'll cover a little bit if we have time, how to use it. So there is Grokking the coding interview, and some Googlers told me that they don't like it, but people from Netflix told me that they loved it and they used it and they passed the interviews. Netflix is the highest paying tech company right now, so I would not dismiss it. I think it's like $19 a month, or you can pay $100 a year, and it's very well written and you just read it. So there's barely any YouTube videos, you just read the material, but it's very well written. Interview Cake is really good one in terms of Python. So when I said you have to memorize certain algorithms, I really like the way they're written out in Interview Cake. It's very clear and it's self-explanatory and has some comments and very good explanation for someone who doesn't have a degree in computer science. For me, it was very, very nice because the code is written the way it's named, you know, from start to finish, you kind of understand what's happening. So it's not just like a bunch of code and you're thinking like, oh my God, what is this? So Google Tech Developer Guide, they have a whole bunch of videos. They have different courses on data structures, all free, so you can cover it through there. And everyone, I put cracking the coding interview because everyone puts it there. I don't like it, to be honest, because it's huge. The book is like this big and I will never have time to read it. But they have very good resources and cheat sheets that you can go, everything is linkable. And it's very good resource. So people who read the book, they passed the interviews. So if you have patience and determination to read 1,000 pages and stick to it, then this is a very good book to read. Finally, some online resources here is article on interview preparation that Google Recruiter gave me, the high scalabilities for senior roles that they expect you to know. And this is an article about that. Google mock interview on YouTube, Facebook mock interview online. And those mock interviews, they exact how they are going up to IDE and everything. It's exact how they are in real life. And here's top 10 algorithm interview questions, and Google Recruiter provided me that. And finally, these two are just references on anxiety and stress and how those interviews are not very efficient. So if it's something that you just want to read, you can go to those resources and look it up. So that's all I have. So we have 15 minutes for questions. So I'll take any questions or any discussions that you want to do.
Hi, this might be more of an Anna Smith question, but perhaps you know the answer to this as well. Will we have access to this recording and this PowerPoint slide after the meeting?
Yeah, I just need to figure that out.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I started taking notes and I'm like, yes, 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 and I'm just like, I just really need this whole recording in these slides.
Yeah, I know I found the record button. Baby steps.
So yeah, yes, and I saw that was being recorded, so I know that's happening. So good. But yeah, no, actually, I think I do have a question for you, Anna, speaker Anna. Yeah, so sorry, I was kind of multitasking with, preparing dinner and all that during some of this. So I apologize if I'm repeating something that you expressed before, but yeah, how long have you been a data scientist? And, I'm intrigued because, you say your background's not what a typical data scientist is in computer science. I relate very much with that. I was a French and psychology major, but I've been a data scientist for 7 years, coding interviews. Oh gosh, it's like a living hell for me. So, so that's why I was really excited to hear your talk. And yeah, I just want to hear more about your background and just general experience.
Sure. So I started data science by ignorance in 2015 because
Me too.
so I thought it was like, it's going to be easy as statistics. I had zero knowledge in machine learning. And so when I joined, there were one of those companies that they did a lot of analytics more than data science. And I learned on the job basic classic machine learning algorithms, random forest, k-means, regression. And then I progressed more and more and more over the years because I was super excited and super enthusiastic about it. So I learned machine learning and everything else. And also on psychology, I just wanted to say that I had a job interview for a senior technical program manager at Apple. And it did not involve any coding interviews. And the lady who interviewed me had a psychology major. So,
really?
and I also know that director or senior director, someone very high up in Yelp, is a former data scientist from LinkedIn, and he also doesn't have STEM degree, and he's a very good data scientist. So I would not even worry about having STEM or not having STEM degree. It can sometimes be difficult as you start getting into deep learning, start covering some math, which you can cover because they don't do any very complicated math. So as long as you kind of know algebra, little bit of calculus, not too much, you'll be fine. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. And it's just more for technical interviews, I think, because nobody even asks you, to derive by hand gradient descent or something like that. So
No, absolutely. And that's reassuring that some of the big name companies, like Facebook or Meta, I guess is now going by, Amazon and all that. It's reassuring to hear that they're not asking that level of crazy questions. And especially, it was very refreshing to hear you say that, seriously, don't sweat it. You can push off the interview more than what you think.
Yep.
Because I think it's very common, from the job candidate's position to be like, oh, okay, whatever works best for you and go for that. But when it comes to that, I mean, that's a different ballgame.
Yep. It takes about 2 to 6 months, depending on your background, to prepare for coding interview at FANG. So some people who are really, really ambitious and they have working spouses at home, they quit their job and they just study full time for 2-3 months. So, but not a lot of us can afford it. We have kids,
Right.
we have jobs. So it takes time to prepare, for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, also, I wanted to add that if you have questions afterwards, I'll give my email, or it depends on how Anna and Gordana want to do it. But I will answer them all, so no problem at all if you have some afterthought.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for this presentation. So I joined a little late, so sorry if you already had talked about this, but so the reason why I joined was I have a lot of interview anxiety around technical interviews, and even though I've spent a lot of time practicing, I still end up blanking completely during the interview, and I just don't even know which side is up. And the most recent interview that I did, I even did 4 different mock interviews with paid mentors, and I felt really good. And then when I did the interview, the same thing happened again. I don't know if you have any recommendations for someone who's facing that kind of situation.
Yep. So I am the same way, and to me it started in engineering school, to be honest, and I would just freeze on engineering tests. So it happened before even the interviews happened, and so my only thing, and I know it's not a good advice. I mean, it's not as good as it should be, but to me, it's only put 80% into muscle memory to the point that you can become a coding monkey and ask for accommodations. So you just have to really, really over prepare, and it will take probably a few months of daily coding, just like trying to remember and trying to apply those algorithms. It just has to be automated, and I hate saying that, because like that doesn't show your work experience at all. But
Yeah. Can you address what you mean by ask for accommodation? You mean like ask for more time during the interview, or?
If you're freezing and you have an anxiety, asking for time won't help you much, because if you freeze, once you froze, it doesn't matter if they give you 3 hours or 4 hours, you're still frozen. You kind of need I feel like you would need someone just to go away, so you can just sit by yourself and look at the problem.
Right.
And so you can ask. I don't know if Fang does it. I tried it with Facebook, it didn't work. So you can ask for take-home tests, but I asked for different other companies, software companies that are smaller than Fang, and so their salaries are smaller, and they were able to give me take-home tests, and so I was solving it this way. So it's just anyway, try to find any way that you can asking for accommodation that you can do it without person present. But I also noticed that when I did this 80% muscle memory, it does work, because you are accessing different part of the brain, but it would take you months, just to like at least 3 months probably, just to like get it to the point that you can be woken up in the middle of the night and remember it. And like, I want to say, I know it sounds crazy, like I had a teacher, because I'm from Soviet bloc, I grew up in Soviet Russia, so I had the algebra teacher, and she was saying, you will remember the quadratic formula for the rest of your life. You'll be sleeping in a burning tank, and when somebody wakes you up, you'll be able to recite it. And she succeeded, because now I still remember that stupid quadratic formula. But it's a lot harder when you have to put that level of memorization onto those 20-30 algorithms. But if you can just committed to muscle memory, any kind of memory that you can, 20-30 algorithms, that's all. Don't go any further, because then you're gonna start losing your mind. 20 to 30 algos, and just keep repeating them until they just become in the back of your mind. That's the only way I think you can overcome it. But that's my opinion. I might be wrong.
So I never considered asking for a take home instead. But does that make me look bad as a candidate if I say I don't feel comfortable with the
No,
thing?
you asking for accommodations, first of all, so you have a right to ask for accommodation. And second of all, because I worked as a manager, I could care less, how you pass the test. So as long as they accommodate, if you pass it, you got the job. And I need someone, when I'm looking for a person to work, I need the person there. I can't wait 3, 4, 6 months until I find some kind of genius to pass those interviews. So if somebody does judge you based on that, you don't want to work there anyways. That's my opinion. So ask for anything you can. The worst they can do is say no. And if they say no, then you say, okay, then I'm going to have to take 3 to 6 months to prepare for this interview, because you're not letting me to take it home.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a really good tip.
You're welcome.
Anna, you can I'm sorry, Anna, you can go ahead and type or paste your contact information in the group chat if you want.
Sure, sounds good. I'm trying to find the chat is only available to team members.
Oh,
So
my
so
bad.
it's not
Let's see if I can fix that.
okay. And if not, you have my information, so you can post the questions in Meetup or, you know, Anna and Gardana, feel free to share my email. So I will answer any questions afterwards. Or if you need more materials or more structure or a study plan, just let me know and I can send you some materials. My LinkedIn got shut down, so you can't find me on LinkedIn anymore until later.
I can paste it into the chat, your email address.
Okay, sounds good.
Really appreciate you sharing it. And I am blown away. Myself and my journey I've done some of these coding interviews, but not with like the nominal big companies like Facebook and Netflix and Google. And I had no idea what this experience was like. I learned so much from about this other world from listening to you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a big industry now, to the point that, you know, people willing to pay $10,000 to someone teach them for every day for 6 months to pass those interviews. The salaries are very high, and that's why there are all these boot camps and books and websites, and it's just a huge industry now. That's why coding interviews are not going away anytime soon.
Hi, Anna. I have a question. This is actually my first time being here. Really cool talk. I was wondering, what to your experience increased landing? What tactic or what ways I increased to land an interview? Either, I guess, like a phone screen or maybe like progress to the technical stage. Is it maybe apply like spray and pray, or is it cold outreach?
What worked for me in all of those interviews, Facebook, Google, Salesforce. So what I did was, like, I found if you go to their hiring website, they usually have all types of events, you know, whatever, coding hackathons, mini presentation, mini how you say it, conferences. They always have some kind of events. So if you register for a few of those events and attend, you don't have to attend them. Eventually you'll get into the database. And once, because they want to see, I guess, active participant or something like that, I'm not sure. But once you attend few of those events, you'll be in a database, and recruiters will start reaching out to you. It might take few months, you know, to get in there, but that's how I got in for Facebook, Google, Amazon. Amazon is the easiest one, right? They're always looking for people. But this is how I was able to get those recruiters. And I would say, even if you're a guy and they have like female diversity or something like that, I would still join and I would still put my resume in. They don't care. As long as you have your data in there, they will reach out eventually.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Anna.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I have a question. Like, I'm going through quite a few technical interviews and I go through them quite well. However, I get stuck in the behavioral interviews as like I'm not able to like tell enough stories, and maybe like my work experience is quite less. I don't have enough stories to tell, or like even though like I'm a business intelligence engineer, so I deal with like all the parts of data processing, but still I'm not able to, like sell myself. So do you have any tips? What worked for you, and how can I better articulate things?
Sure. So I'll give you terrible advice, but it worked for me, because people, say different things. So one, there's TED talks on the behavioral part. So if you go to TED and put
Mhm.
interviews in there, they like talk a lot about all these things and they present it way better than me. And second part, honestly, what I had to do, because I have huge work experience, but I forget what I did and where. I don't remember what I did yesterday. I don't remember if I had breakfast this morning. I don't remember all those things. So I just looked at the most common questions. I wrote down the answers and I just kind of also committed it to memory. And honestly, you can make anything up because nobody checks it. So, I mean, I hate to say it because it's a public conversation and I'm presenting it, but someone gave me this advice. So, like, you weren't here earlier, but I was earlier here. So I used to bartend. So I was a bartender before I broke into industry and started going to school for engineering and trying to find my first job. And so I was drinking with the attorney and I said, "How did you get a job?" He's like, "I lied on my interview." So I'm not saying you should lie, but what I'm saying is you can say anything you can. Look up online behavioral question and answers and just modify them to what you had in your personal life, because you have all types of experiences that can apply, and just as long as you don't hiccup during the interview and it sounds good, you'll be good. So it's just a game. Look at it as a game. Don't take it seriously and that it has to be verifiable. You just try, it's like an audition for a movie. You're just trying to pass it. That's all. When you come to a job, it's completely different story.
Right. So it's like fake it till you make it.
Yep. I would say it. I'm sorry. I did. It's not official, but I would say it that way because it works. I mean,
All right. I'll try it this time. But thank you for your advice.
you're welcome.
Is it okay if I give a recommendation to Swapnula?
Yeah.
There is
Sure.
a website called Pramp, PRAMP, and you can do practice interviews with other people who are getting ready too. And there's different types of interviews, including behavioral interviews. So that might be a good way to do it, and it's completely free.
PRAMP Pramp.
Yeah, PRAMP.
Do you want to
Thank
type
you
that in the
very
chat? Can you?
No, it says for team members only.
Something for me to learn from next time. PRAMP.
Yep,
Thank you so much for sharing.
you're welcome.
I learned something new as well. I didn't know there was this website. That's pretty good.
All right. With that, I want to heartily thank Anna for giving us her very inspiring and very comprehensive talk today. There are so many tools out there that I didn't know of, and if I have not been interviewing lately, but I now have career insurance because has taught me so much today. All right, so here's what I'll do now. I'll transition us to our update exercise. So I'm going to explain the exercise, And then we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then we're going to come back and do the exercise. Explanation, quick break, and come back. So let me see if I can share my screen.